Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all. Welcome back. So good to see so many familiar faces, so many new faces from so many parts of our lives. Gamal and I are very excited to learn with and from you all today. And before we jump right into a conversation with our amazing guests, Anita Patel and John Marker, we do want to take just a couple minutes to frame this next series and talk about why we're here and why this matters. So I'm enormously grateful to have a network to learn with and from those in the Gather network. You are my strongest assets, and I really appreciate you. I'm increasingly interested in how boards and board members can be in community with one another. I'm increasingly interested in a learning and leadership community, practicing a culture of inquiry, and using generative thinking to move beyond the traditional and often backsliding roles of boards. Boards we might call archaic and at times wholly inadequate for the challenges facing nonprofits today. We need to redefine and reimagine what boards can be. Strategic partners instead of micromanagers. Generative thinkers rather than in the weeds doers. A community of learners, a think tank, a kitchen cabinet, trusted advisors. That's how I'd like all of us who are here today to think of boards. And like many of us, I'm on my own anti-racist learning journey, unlearning biases and prejudices that I've been taught as a straight white male, undoing white supremacy and undoing racism, and using boards as a leverage point for this work is what I'm eager to do. And I'm incredibly excited and grateful to partner with Gamal on building this new series focused on governance with an equity lens, because there is an enormous opportunity as we rethink and reimagine boards, what multiracial boards look like and how they can be models for multiracial communities. How might we push, challenge, and reimagine our ideas of board governance and culture? And how can we do this with an equity lens? Part of today is the beginning of how we might build multiracial communities together. So like I said, I'm extremely grateful to be in partnership with Gamal on this journey. For me, DEI work is part of my own liberation. How we educate ourselves is how we liberate ourselves and others. Gamal and I have a vision of multiracial communities, and we ask each other questions like, how might boards model what it looks like to be in community with one another? How might multiracial boards model what multiracial communities look like? So after almost a year to the date, after George Floyd's murder and almost 100 years after the Tulsa Race Massacre, the work is more important than ever. And so right now I have the honor of passing it to my friend and colleague Gamal to share a bit more. Gamal is still.
Thank you, Seth. And it's really great to be with all of you. I love seeing all of these faces that I get to know from either sitting on boards or having worked with your boards, or just even being in fellowship and community with you all. One thing that I want to really lift up is the importance of continuing to look at multiracial families and the experience that multiracial families have in whether it's the Jewish community or in other spaces and places within the society. But also as a person who is from a multiracial family, who is a Black man, a gay man, a Jewish man, and has the privilege of being very much so connected to all of the communities of my identity. At this stage in my life, particularly as I think about leadership and working with boards and decision makers, I think now it's more than ever incumbent upon me and folks like Seth and others who are passionate about this idea of what would it be like for us to actually build multiracial communities, right? And so that it doesn't have to live just within a particular dwelling, if you will, but it's something that we could all actually emulate and participate in. And so for me, and for us, it's the next level of this work that we're doing and that we've been doing over the past year for some of us and maybe the past lifetime for others. And so, I just want to briefly say that I grew up in a place called West Mount Airy in Philadelphia. Some of you have heard the story before, but my parents moved there because they were a biracial family, and they wanted to live with other biracial families and raise their children with biracial families and mixed race communities. So I grew up in a place where there were Jews, there were Christians, Muslims, Catholics, white people, Black people, Hispanic, right, Asian. And we have this very funny memory, a group of friends of mine and I, when we first came home after college for winter break. And we were like, whoa, the world is not multiracial, right? Like it's pretty segregated. And obviously, we had been outside of West Mount Airy before, but this idea of the power of multiracial community building, right? And it's so important, particularly when we're thinking about boards, right? Because the power of it is that we have different perspectives, we have different passions that can all coexist, we have different ideas and opinions that we can push back on. And so we're here to really charge ourselves and all of you to continue to think about, or to begin to even think about, how can our boards be multiracial and how can we as decision makers build multiracial communities?
Thank you, Gamal. So we want to actually right away break you out into some brief breakouts in pairs. You're each going to have 2.5 minutes to do just brief intros, your name, your role, your organization, your city. And you're each going to have 2.5 minutes to do this. Get some conversation going, and then we will come back and start the conversation. I'm see if I can do this, see if my math is good. 30 groups, we're going to assign automatically. There's 60. Enjoy. We'll put a little, what do you call that? Banner up there after the 2.5 minutes. So enjoy. And you should see a little button on your screen that says to join breakout groups. And if anyone is not, let's see. Tamar, are you looking for a room? Tamar, I'm going to put you in a room with Liz. Actually, I'm going to put you in a room with 10. Come on, sec. There we go. And who else needs a room? Tamar, if you're there, do you see that? Gamal, do you want to go in a room with someone? No. Okay. All right. Emily's by herself. Let's see. Hold on one sec. If I can move someone. Liz Mandel. Here. I'm going to move Emily to. Okay. Hey, good start. You're on mute.
I said a while back, if somebody's alone, then I'll go in a breakout room.
Oh.
And then but I was breaking up on my side. Was it breaking up on your side? Okay.
You're good.
Great. You are great.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So yeah.
Do you think we hit them over the head enough with multiracial communities?
I think so. Yeah. So when we come back, we'll you're gonna intro John.
Yeah. And I'm ready for that.
You're ready for that. Great. Oh shoot. Susie Hughes. You sure? Yeah, actually, there is someone who could use a room.
Yeah.
Can I put you in there?
Yes.
Here, actually, look. You should see a button on room 8. Do you see that?
I'm on an iPad, so.
Okay, you know what? Here, I'm gonna do
Oh,
it.
join breakout room. Why don't you just move people?
Okay, here, I will.
Or do you want me to move them?
No, I got it. Hi, Tamar. I'm gonna move you to room 16, Tamar, so you can be with
Okay,
someone.
thank you.
Yeah, there you go. You see that? And then Gamal, so something room 8. Okay, and now we're gonna do 2.5 minutes left.
Okay. Do you want me to go anywhere or do anything?
No, you're good. Stay here, keep me company.
Yeah. Cool. So how are you feeling?
Good. I always feel better after the intro. This is all recorded, just so you know.
Great.
So we can just reflect on our
Let's reflect on how wonderful everyone is.
that's great. No, it's
Everybody is wonderful though. And we have some really so there's people here from the AJWS board, a bunch of people, and from Upstart, which is great. I'm
glad your internet's holding up.
Yeah, honestly, when I was talking, I kind of fumbled because it seemed like I was breaking up.
No, you're good. And just so you know, we're only 2 minutes behind, maybe 3
Okay.
minutes. I'm gonna close the room.
But in all, I mean, I can watch the video, but I'm just curious, like, how did I do? Because I really was in my head because it kept being choppy and like I couldn't see my. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
You like how
Good
I
to
just
see you.
bounced you
How are
around
you?
a couple different rooms?
Jarring, I got to
It's
tell
so
you.
funny with Zoom. With Zoom, you can just like completely control people's lives. Hi,
I
Susie.
know.
How are you?
I know.
Hi.
It's so true. Hi, Susie.
I
Susie
just
and I were
lost you.
just in a room together. So
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Well, I saw there was someone missing. I was trying to do things. You know how
Cindy.
breakouts go.
Yes,
Good to see you.
good to see you too.
Susie, you were just saying you have a board meeting or retreat coming up?
Yeah, and I totally am interested on just like what activities to do to kind of get our roles and kind of some policies in place.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we've grown so fast. It's been hard.
So folks should be coming back in just a minute. Here they come. Welcome back, everybody. Cool. All right. Hope you got to know one other person there and share a little bit. Gamal, I'm going to pass it over to you to do our first intro.
All right. So I have the privilege of introducing John Marker. I'm not going to read your bio, John. So sorry. They're not going to know all of the incredible accomplishments that you have accomplished in this very short time of your professional career so far. But what they are going to know is that you are a true champion for community building, for racial justice, for equity. I have been able to work with John in a few different capacities in my role as the SVP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Federation, as well as in my capacity as a consultant and a lay leader. And what I will say is that in all of those spaces, you lead with such humility and grace, and you really are very thoughtful in terms of hearing each person. And when I say each person, people from all over the country, and kind of putting together, okay, here's a thing that makes sense. And you've built the REI Funders community, which is a community of funders who are really focused on learning and reimagining how they give from an equitable and racial lens standpoint, to the work that you do with Jim Joseph Foundation, to the work that you do with your synagogue, which you're the board of, et cetera. So it's a real honor to have you here today, John Marker, and to be in community and in conversation with you ongoing.
Thanks, Gamal. And before we let John say a word, I get to introduce Anita. So Anita Patel is the Vice President of Grantmaking at the Bush Foundation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I met Anita a few years back as part of a leadership funders group that many on this call are a part of. We met in Boston and LA a couple times, and we discussed ways in which foundations might invest in leadership through fellowships, through CEO trainings, through sabbaticals, and board development, and specifically how funders might do this with an equity lens. So in addition to Anita's impressive resume, which I highly encourage you all to read, I know Anita to be an incredibly kind, compassionate, and passionate social justice warrior who is wicked smart and who has incredible wisdom and experience that we're excited to discuss with her. So I get to start with you, Anita, to ask you this first question. And it's a question just about your why. So I'm curious if you wanted to share a story about why equity in board governance is important to you. And maybe even like, what does that word, what does equity in board governance even mean or look like to you?
Yeah, I'm taking a breath because I think there's so much. And I just first want to say I'm just humbled to be with this group and alongside John in this conversation and Gamal and Seth. It's just, this is a passion of mine. And it's not often I get to be in a group that's like, hey, governance is something as a huge tool for equity, justice, liberation. And so I already told Seth, if I get carried away, give me the sign and I'll stop, because it's just, to me, this is really important. And Gamal, as you were sharing some of your story, I was just pausing because I was imagining what it was like to grow up with a group of multiracial families. I am a biracial woman. I'm Indian and white, and my family, actually, my parents left Minneapolis because they were experiencing so much racism being an interracial couple, and they moved to a small town in Minnesota thinking they'd have a little more autonomy. And this was a town that the Norwegians and the Germans didn't mix, and so our family was something really new for folks and challenging for folks. And that's actually part of why equity and governance matters to me. So early on, we were really excited. Some of our family from India was going to come and visit, and we were just sharing it in town. And when I say small, this is a town of like 700 people. So folks knew we were sharing this story. And the church that we went to, the council rapidly came together and made some rules that folks who didn't belong to the church or hadn't been baptized couldn't come into the church. And they did that because we'd been talking about how excited we were to share every moment with these relatives that were traveling. And so it was a really early lesson in the power governance can have to either open up or shut down spaces, conversations, people. And it was something that has always sat with me of, look at what we can do when we use powers maybe not for good, but then also look at what we can do when we think about the tools that currently exist within systems, right? So we need to change systems, reimagine, totally tear down and recreate. And the laws, the guidelines, the bylaws, Robert's rules are all tools we can use to actually move forward justice and liberation. And I think we don't often talk about it in that way, right? We think we protest on the streets and that's the activism. But what are we protesting? We're protesting the laws and the guidelines that our systems set up, that we set up as people who are part of systems. And so for me, this is a huge piece of our role on boards, is to look at where are those spaces that, because of the way we live as board members, because of what we foster within our organizations, we can actually build justice and move this country toward the liberation, towards the equity that we need. And I'll just end with one story. Fast forward, I've had the joy and the opportunity to be a part of a lot of boards, But I want to give deep credit to the president of the organization I'm at now, the Bush Foundation. Our board has had deep commitment to looking at equity and governance. And we recently made, in addition to a lot of other decisions and actions around racial equity and intersectional equity, we recently decided to make a $150 million investment in addressing racial wealth gaps. And that's because the board has a culture to have these conversations, to share perspective, and to say, these are things we can do to make a tangible difference. Will it solve everything? No, absolutely not. But is it something we can do in the reparative spirit? Absolutely, and that matters. So I'm gonna pause because I could say so much more, but I'm gonna stop and leave it there.
Thank you, Anita. And I want to come back to that recent historic gift. And I just put the link in the chat for those who are not familiar with this. I think that the biggest racial justice gift, especially from a regional funder in recent memory or ever. So I want to pause there. Thank you, Anita. And I want to ask John the same question about your why. Why is governance with an equity lens important to you? And what does that look like? What does that even mean?
Yeah, first and foremost, echoing just gratitude for being in this space today with so many of you, Seth and Gamal, stewarding the space, Anita, who welcomed me with open arms in the Leadership Funders group and has stewarded a lot of my learning over the last few years, but many of you who I've had the pleasure to work with in the rest of the Brady Bunch squares here. It's so great to share this time and space. I was recently in a conversation with someone many of us know, Alana Kaufman, who brought me a piece of wisdom around sometimes we might have good reasons for this work, but our community, in particular the Jewish community that I know many people on this call are representing, needs anecdotes, needs metaphors to understand. It's part of our tradition. And so I'm gonna just call out, that's what I'm about to do here, which is this morning as I dropped off my daughter at her preschool, one of the other parents approached me and just did the polite, like, how's everything going? And I launched into a monologue about all of the ways that the pandemic has changed all of my hopes for how my children were going to develop. They are almost 7 and 4, and the missed opportunities and this and that. And then I remembered I've never spoken to this person before. 5 minutes in, I figured I'd ask his name and like build a little relationship there. And it occurred to me that the pandemic is just one of those moments in life where you can throw up your hands and say, this was not the life that I was promised that I was going to get to lead. Or you can say, I now actually need to have some expertise around herd immunity and epidemiology. And I need to learn this because that's what the moment calls of me. And that's how I'm going to grow and show up in this space. And I grew up in a family and in a community that was formed out of intentionality. It was a planned community in Columbia, Maryland, where my folks raised me not to just accept the present moment, but to look at the moment around you and say, what if this is working and what needs to shift? And I think we as a country are in a deeply overdue moment of reflection where we are realizing that the dominant narrative in our society has for centuries silenced and erased the contributions and the memory and the wisdom and the thought processes of many, many people in our country. And demographically, we know soon to be the majority of people in our country who do not share the same identity markers as I do as a cisgender, straight, white, heterosexual man. And this is an opportunity where we could throw up our hands. And frankly, from the vantage point that I sit in now at a foundation, I see often people throw up their hands and just say, find me the person of color to sit on my board. But that's like me throwing up my hands with my daughter right now and saying, someone find me an epidemiologist to explain the pandemic to her. This is our moment to say we're in a position of leadership, whether that's board governance or many CEOs on this call as well, and say this is our opportunity to change the narrative, to say that this isn't working for everyone. And it's upon us to actually demonstrate leadership in this moment and chart the way forward, not just to uphold the status quo that was the story that was told to us as we rose to this position.
Thanks, John. Beautiful story. I want to go back to Anita, to the grant in the article you just referenced. And I'm curious if you would comment or expand on the learnings and the process. Because one thing I took from the article was the time. This was not just like a one board meeting or a week-long project. This looked like potentially almost 10 years or 10 plus years. And I'm curious if you can just share more about the process and learnings that went into giving this $100 million gift to reduce wealth inequality and how you see that potentially affecting boards.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think to your point and to what so many of us talk about in terms of making sure our boards have enough diverse perspective, diversity in terms of race, culture, and many other dimensions, that's the thing that for us, we worked on for decades, right? To say, it's not just the job of the board to govern, it's the job of board members to create a healthy space where, as Mia Birdsong says, it's a feeling of belonging, that we each belong here, that our perspectives belong here and can shape the work we do together so that we can help guide the work of the organization. And that was the kind of work that we've been doing for decades, to say, we don't just dive into, approving the minutes, taking time to say, as John was noting, like, how are you? Let's check in, let's know each other, let's understand what's happening across the communities we serve from the perspective of each of us and how that affects our own experience. And so while the 150 million gift actually happened relatively quickly because, and credit to the Ford Foundation and some others for kind of spurring and inspiring that idea and working with Edgar Villanueva, it was the fact that the board already had this foundation, this ability to trust each other, a mix of different folks on the board. What we often hear from people who are part of the Bush Foundation board is that this is the most diverse space they've ever been in. And they mean that as they talk about it, what they say is in terms of race, in terms of sector, in terms of political ideology. And that's not an accident, right? It takes work. It means that we are talking with people all the time about, here's the work of the Bush Foundation. You're doing some really interesting things. You carry really interesting perspectives, but it's never like, oh, we need a biracial Indian woman on the board. Would you join? That's not the conversation, right? I don't think any of us feels great and like we belong. Well, I don't want to assume, but for me, I don't feel great and like I belong if somebody boils me down to a single identity to fill a space. So after the murder of George Floyd, of course, we've been doing racial equity work, but it just made even more urgent the call to say, what else? And for us, it was talking about, we believe reparations are something the government needs to look at, but reparative spirit, work that's in the reparative spirit, is something all of us can do. And for a foundation where our wealth came from a man by the name of Archie Bush, who helped to found and grow 3M, we know that that money is built on systems of oppression. Most of philanthropy, that wealth is built on systems of oppression. So we have to engage in things that are in the reparative spirit. So we were able to move after the murder of George Floyd fairly quickly to this decision because of all of the foundation that had already been laid with the board, with the staff, and the link between board staff and the communities we serve. Maybe I'll pause there, Seth.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anita. We could go on and on. And for those, actually, do you want to just say 30 seconds about who Edgar Villanueva is for those who may not know?
Sure. Edgar Villanueva wrote a book called Decolonizing Wealth, and it's really thinking about money as medicine, how we look at where wealth has been colonized, calling out this idea of working in the spirit of reparations. There's so much in the book to try to narrow it down. I really recommend you take a look at it. And I think one of the things he says, and as we've been working with him, is he put it out there and didn't actually expect people in organizations to follow his lead, his guidance, his invitation. And I think there's so much that each of us can do. And when we surprise one another, that's a good thing, right? It's a little bad in that we think we can't actually make change at the speed we want to. Some of that is true, but some of that I think is we get in our own way with the I can'ts instead of really looking at all of the things we can do.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. Gamal, you want to throw a couple questions?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, first, I just want to lift up so much of what you've just shared. And I have the privilege of sitting on the AJWS board, the American Jewish World Service board. And what you spoke about, Anita, really reminds me of the work that's happening there in terms of just laying the groundwork, laying the foundation, knowing that this takes time, right? And there are no quick fixes to equity. There are no quick fixes to diversifying, or even for the individual work that each of us need to do to be more inclusive. So I just want to, again, lift up the work that you've been able to do at the foundation. And when you said that, while the gift happened somewhat quickly, at the same time, it really came out of years of work, the foundation of it. So thank you for that. And John, so you have started the REI Funders group, and I'm a part of it, so I shouldn't talk about it like I don't know what it is or what you're doing there. But I guess first I want you to share with people what REI Funder, who we are. But also, John, I would love for you to share with people, what is it that you really hope these leaders and these decision makers gain from this experience of being a part of this entity, REI Funders?
Yeah.
So what is it, and what is the one thing you hope people will gain?
Yeah, thank you, Gamal, and thanks for not only teeing it up, but serving as one of the steering committee members of that group as well, and co-leading. This is Racial Equity and Inclusion Funder Circle, and it started from a place that at the beginning of the pandemic, with the murder of George Floyd, with the racial uprisings that were happening across the country, suddenly the Jim Joseph Foundation was fielding calls from funders every which way in our ecosystem, saying, we've heard you use some of this language before around DEI, and admittedly, this is not our core. The Jim Joseph Foundation is focused on Jewish education and leadership development. The way we get to this work is by saying that if we want more people to find connection, meaning, and purpose through Jewish wisdom and learning, that means we need to be learning from people with different traditions that are not just the Eastern European Ashkenormative perception, but that there's wisdom in a whole series of walks of life that we could be elevating that could drive more people to connection, meaning, and purpose. And frankly, these calls got overwhelming and they were ineffective to have one-off calls. And there was brilliance in our community that just needed one other voice, and it existed in the field, but they didn't know each other yet. And so we tried to create a space where, and Anita, I want to lift up what you were saying around belonging here, where people could show up as themselves. I think that there's an evolution in my mind from inclusion, where you are saying to a group of people, come to the center that already exists, and belonging, where everyone is getting to show up as themselves, ask the questions that are on their mind. I think it's a lower barrier to entry, and one that requires a bravery of, we don't know where we're going to go exactly. And over the last 7, 8 months, this community that is based in an honest curiosity from philanthropic professionals has grown to be 63 individuals from 43 different funding institutions in the Jewish ecosystem who are coming together to do the work. I think there is an honest acceptance that comes from some models like the Bush Foundation, but also some models like Equity in the Center that are promoting this work takes a decade, and don't rush it, and come into it and recognize that a lot of people are coming into it right at the start with both curiosity and fear of messing up. That can often lead them to a place of failure to act. And I think that gets to what my hopes are, that we have lots of different working groups, conversations in motion, but the core that I am trying to encourage is to take action, that you are sitting in this chair of positional power in this moment in time to do something. If all that you think is possible is maintaining the status quo, then move out of the way for someone else to be there, because this is a unique moment in time. And none of, I'm gonna go out on a limb and presume that very few of us on this call had dinner table conversations around equity and board governance when they were growing up. And so we're all learning this together. I think Jennifer Harvey has actually written some brilliant pieces on this around her book, Raising White Kids, that we just have arrested development in our language and our sense of possibility because we haven't talked about this. We haven't wrapped our mouths around words. And so to create a space where funders can be brave and inquisitive is a midwife to the actual process that is being stewarded by folks of color, communities of color, who are leading this work on the ground. And just, I'm excited that we can find a role to play in this, but this in and of itself is certainly not the story. That the funders are not the story. The funders are a conduit to that work.
Thank you. And I having the privilege of being able to lead the education pieces in that group, and also just to speak with the funders that are participating. I think, you know, something that you really that I want to lift up is that safe space to come as they are and where they're at and their particular journey as an individual, but also as a representative of their foundation. And having a community, having a space where you can talk about these issues and these topics and ideas and to collaborate, I think is crucial. So, you know, we encourage everyone on the call to think about where can you continue to develop your thinking and your ability to explore ideas and philosophies around diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that's safe so that you can really go deep. Anita, I just have one question for you before we kind of break into the next part here. So Decolonizing Wealth is a book that I also very much so promote and wish that I wrote, but I didn't. But it does a great job at deconstructing and really looking at philanthropy as the system of philanthropy, right? And so I'm just curious, you know, what would you say is one thing that you could talk about today that could be useful for folks in terms of like, what's one thing, a need in the field in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So I know there are many needs, but if you could think about one thing that you could share with people right now that would be helpful for them to think about or to do in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within philanthropy, that'd be great.
Good question. Quick answer. No, I think, so there's a couple things that stand out to me. One is, I think, really examining who the we is when we say we in any different situation, right? So when we talk about, well, we need practices that ensure we have this kind of responses from applicants and this kind of reporting. Who's the we? Is that actually an equitable thing? Or is it because the we is foundation staff who believe that's what they need, but it's not actually in service of community? I think there's also a question of when we say, we need to do this work and we need to make sure we're meeting people where we're at. That is so true. And there's some of us in the we who have been carrying burdens of doing this work and of raising the conversations for a long time, and other folks of the we who've been holding the power and not allowing that conversation air. And so I think just continuing to say, this is maybe more of a high level answer than you were looking for, but it manifests itself in all of the assumptions we hold, that in the we decide how fast can we move, how big can we create change, and who are we creating change with and for, and who gets to have the power and share the power. So just continuing to ask ourselves that as we engage in governance conversations.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anita. So folks, we hope that you will stay on. There's always this phenomena when people are put into breakout rooms, it's suddenly everybody has to have lunch and go walk the dog. But we hope that you will actually stay on, because the conversation's not over, but it will complete promptly at 1 o'clock. Sorry, it's 1 o'clock my time, whichever time zone you are in. But so we're going to go into breakout rooms now, and we'd love for you to think about a few things. And Seth is actually putting the prompts into the chat, so you'll have them available to you. And we just want you to think about, what are things either that you learned or that are coming up for you? I mean, these conversations are always so compact. One answer could really be talked about. One question could be talked about for a full hour. So we know that there's always more, but what's one thing that you're gaining from the conversation, and what could you do next? And who could help hold you accountable for taking some sort of an action towards being more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable within your board leadership or in other community leadership that you're involved with? So something you're learning or thinking about, what are you going to do next, and who's going to hold you accountable, all in 9 minutes. Have a blast.
Let's see, Alan, would you like to go to a breakout room if you're there? Let's see if we can get here. You know what we're going to do here? Ooh, we're going to move this to room 8. There we go. There we go. Okay. Trying to get at least 3 people in each room. 3. There's 2. You know what we're going to do? We're going to 3, 2. Gamal, this is great. I'm just moving things around. Oh, let me do a timer. Stop. 10 minutes. Jessica, Melissa. Here, let's do. Okay. Yo.
Hey,
And Alan and is that Jaya or Jaya? Haya? If you want to go to a room.
I love the spelling, which Jaya, I think.
Yeah, John is in. Here, should I move them to other rooms? Here, I'm going to move them to other rooms. Hold on.
Yeah, just put them.
Yeah.
They're not cooperating. Alan and Jaya, I think it's Jaya.
Let's move John to room 4. There we go. Okay, now everyone's in 3 rooms of 3 or 4 who didn't block out. Whew. Yeah, it's great. So much to say. Should we make these 2 hours next time? Or hour?
Yeah. Should we go in a breakout room?
Should we go? We are in a breakout room. And we like actually going? No, I'm good.
Okay.
But do you want to?
Who is Alan? Alan, who are you? And why are you muted?
This is great. I would say, how do you think it's going? This is recorded again, so be doing great.
Yes.
Let's, when we come back for 5, this is one where I wish we could, next time I'm going to pause the recording.
Yeah.
2 questions.
I feel like that's a good practice. Yeah.
Actually, I should say 3 options. Do we come back and go straight into closing, thanks and closing? Do we come back and there was actually a couple really, one especially good question that comes up all the time around tokenism that someone private messaged me that I could lift up.
Oh, okay. I love those questions.
Yeah, should we do that or give people call on 1 or 2 people to share briefly what they are going to do?
I think we should let them talk. So I think we should have people everybody put into the chat like one thing that they gain from the from their breakout, and then we can let a few people speak verbally on it. One second, I just have to do something I totally forgot.
No, I love that. Can we do this? Let me ask Eliza to ask her tokenism question, because I'm sure a lot of people have that. And then will you say what you just said? Like put what your actions and your questions in the chat.
Yes.
I mean, I need like 30 seconds the closing is really just thanks and save the date and stay tuned for some resources. I mean, right?
Yeah.
So we can go right up to, let's say a minute till. And also I think to remind people.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Also, I have a hard stop.
Okay.
At 1 o'clock my time.
Okay.
But then I don't know if you're around like in an hour and a half, if you want to do like a quick.
I have a couple calls this afternoon.
I
so
can.
You can try me, or we can. Yeah, try me.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, if you don't want to talk to me, it's fine.
No, I won't. This is good. Good.
It's very good, Jeff. Why do I call you Jeff?
Why do you call me Jeff?
It's like
another.
It's a new thing. It just started the other day, and like even when I was talking to myself about you, yesterday, I called you Jeff.
Well, you do it out of love. Are you just swigging tequila? Because that's awesome if you are. These breakouts are good though, I must say. Like sometimes Zoom like really just hits it out of the park.
Does it?
I think they did one room just.
I mean, Anita's fantastic, by the way.
She's amazing. Yeah. Oh, because Alan's on there. Do you
How do you know her again?
were you listening? You weren't listening. Wait,
No.
hold on. No, you weren't listening.
No.
5 more minutes. I just realized, yeah, these 2 people are all by themselves.
Who?
Betsy Ehrman, who I know, and Juliet Linzer. Do you want to join?
I don't know either one of them. I mean, you can put me in there. I don't know either one of them. You want to put me in there?
I will. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So I will put you, one sec, room.
My coffee.
12. Okay, here you go, room 12. Have fun. Hi, Aziza. Hi, Harriet.
Hi, Seth. Good to see you.
You too. Thanks for joining.
Happy to be here. So excited.
Cool. And I just saw my friend Aziza, and then she. Welcome back.
Sorry, we were in the middle of a really important conversation. So if you could just pause everyone so we could finish, that'd be fantastic.
You can finish it, in public now. No, it's actually a great segue because I know Zoom does a terrible job at like breaking you, interrupting at just the most inopportune times. But it's a great plug of after this. We have a couple more minutes, but I will just say this before I forget. You'll get everyone's email. So if there's people who you met in your breakouts or any of the speakers, you will have the opportunity to reach out and follow up with conversations because we really wish, we really hope that part of this is in addition to the learning, is the connecting and the networking, and again, the building of these multiracial communities. So I don't have to say that again. I would love to actually lift up is if Eliza is still here. She had a great question. Yeah, there you are, Eliza. Do you want to share your question to the group? Because I think it's great, and I'm sure a lot of people also have a similar question.
Yeah, so what I had sort of just shared directly with Seth was that, when I think about diversity, I'm sorry, dogs bark. When I think about diversity, I really think about it in the broadest sense in terms of diverse races, ethnicities, religions, gender identities, socioeconomics, political perspectives. But I often feel like that other people, or that sometimes diversity is being used really as just a synonym sort of for racial or skin color diversity. And so I don't know, that's just something that I'm noticing, and I find myself trying to understand, when people say it, what are they really meaning? So that's kind of a question. And then sort of something that Anita said, and I think it's related, how do we avoid tokenizing people? And not making it sort of like a checkbox, we're just trying to say oh, well, we have 53 women and 50%, people of color. So those are two kind of connected.
Can I respond to this, please?
You want to take Anita's question? Sure, go for it.
Go. You go. Anita, please.
If Anita, is Anita still here?
She is, but I don't see the video feed.
Oh, I
for
don't see.
Anita right
Okay.
now.
Okay. Well,
So what I would say is that we all have to start somewhere, and that it's about really doing the work. And so if you call somebody and say, hey, I want you to be on this board because we're trying to diversify, yet you know nothing about the person, you don't know about their skill sets, you don't know about their professional interests, you don't know about their personal passions, right? If you have not done that work, then that is tokenizing. If you have done that work and you feel like you can reach out to somebody because you have an understanding of, a broad understanding of what they want to do in the world or in the community or, in engaging in some ways, then there's a place to start, right? And so it's not really tokenizing as much as it is fulfilling on your mission to diversify. And people, I find, often use the fear of tokenizing as a way to do nothing. And so it's an avoidance tactic, right? And whether you're intentionally avoiding it or not, that is what materializes as an avoidance tactic. So I encourage people to lean in and to do the work, right? And when AJWS called me or when Upstart called me to say, hey, I want you to consider being on our board, there was a lot of research and thought that had gone into that. And they explained to me that they were a part of a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion journey, and that they would like me to be a part of their commitment to diversify. But they also had many other things to say that they had found out about me that they were interested in. So that's what I would share in terms of that question.
Thanks, Gamal. And Anita is coming back. And I also just want to say, we know it's the top of the hour, and if you have to run, please feel free. I at least will stick around for another 15 minutes or so to continue chatting and answering questions. But again, if you have to run, please do. As you're running, just a thank you to Anita and to John and to Gamal, who I think also has to run. He might have already run. And we will be following up with our next board talk in 2 weeks from today, June 4th. Friday, June 4th at 10 a.m. is with Paula Pretlow. She is a foundation trustee at the Kresge Foundation and the Weinberg Foundation in Baltimore. So please join us for that. And we'll be sending out some articles, again, the emails and some kind of pro tips or some other resources that we've gleaned from this conversation as well.
And I just want to name, I'm so sorry, my Zoom just totally froze. So I'm on my phone now and I'm happy to stay. I apologize for that.
Awesome. Oh, there you are. Thanks, Anita. Fantastic.
So good to be with you all. And the conversation was just started, Seth. If there are any additional groups you want to form and lunch conversations, game for it. And happy to be accountable to everyone who's still on the call. And thanks for sharing space and letting me jump in on this. But I have a call I've got to go to.
Thank you, John. We'll be in touch. I'll see you soon.
Seth, just in terms of like moving forward.
Yeah. Here, you know what? I'm going to pause the recording. Wait, Martine, remember we did this last time.
That's okay. This is not personal.
Okay, but still, I'm going to pause the recording.